He spit in the soup. He did it in front of everyone. He carried the bowl from the kitchen himself, set it on the table with a sound that was not quite a slam, and said, "Charity case gets what the house provides." Then he leaned down, close enough that the man at the table could have counted the stitching on his collar, and he spit in it, deliberately, looking at him while he did it, and then he stood up and walked away. The man at the table was 67 years old. He was wearing a flannel shirt, frayed at one cuff. His hands were resting on the edge of the table, still, large, the hands of someone who had carried heavy things for a very long time. He looked at the soup. He looked at the owner walking back toward the kitchen. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He reached forward and moved the bowl aside and folded his hands where it had been, and he was quiet in the specific way that carries more weight than noise. 4 tables saw this. Not one person said anything. Not the couple near the window, not the 2 men at the counter, not the teenage girl taking orders whose hand had stopped moving on her notepad. Nobody moved. Nobody knew who was sitting at that table. Nobody had asked. Nobody had looked at the man with the frayed cuff and the still hands and thought to wonder what those hands had done, or where they had been, or what had been asked of them. But by 5 in the morning, by the time the first light came through those windows, every table in the restaurant would be empty. Every customer, every regular, everyone who had walked through that door would be gone. And the reason they were gone had nothing to do with the soup. Have you ever watched something wrong happen in a public place and felt the silence pressing against the inside of your chest? Have you ever known you should speak and found the words wouldn't come? This story is about what happens when dignity doesn't need words to move. It doesn't need to be loud to empty a room. Stay with this. Let me take you back. Earlier that day, Raymond Elias Cole had driven to the dinner because his granddaughter had asked him to, and because he did not, as a general rule, refuse his granddaughter anything that was within the realm of safe and reasonable. She was 9 and had recently discovered that grandfather had a thing for navy bean soup and had announced, with the conviction of a child who has found a lever, that the Harvest Table on Clement Street made the best in the city. Raymond was 67 years old and had retired from the United States Army 4 years earlier after a career that had spanned 31 years, 2 wars, 4 combat deployments, and a final rank of Sergeant Major, the highest non-commissioned rank, the rank that means you have run the machine, that you have trained the people who train the people, that when you speak in a room full of soldiers, the room listens. He had mustered out quietly with a ceremony that he had asked to be kept small because large ceremonies embarrassed him, and he had come home to the city where he had grown up, and he had begun the adjustment that veterans begin, the long relearning of what ordinary life expects of you after 31 years of something else entirely. He was not a man who talked about his service at restaurants. He was not wearing insignia. He was in a flannel shirt his daughter had given him 3 Christmases ago, which he wore because it was comfortable, and he was sitting alone because his granddaughter had been picked up an hour earlier by her mother, his daughter Simone, who had a work commitment and couldn't stay. He had stayed, because the soup was in fact very good, and because the evening was quiet, and because 31 years of field rations had given him a particular appreciation for sitting still with something warm. The owner's name was Victor Greer. He had run the Harvest Table for 14 years. He was 53 years old and had, over those 14 years, built a clientele and a reputation and a self-regard that had grown faster than either deserved. He was known for his personality at the bar. Loud, personable, the kind of man who could make a room feel it was being favored by his attention. He was less known for what he was like in the back, or on slow evenings, or when customers arrived without reservations, or when customers arrived who did not look to his practiced appraisal, like the kind of customers whose approval he was curating. Victor Greer had told his hostess 6 months earlier that he wanted the restaurant's aesthetic to reflect a particular clientele. He had not said what he meant by that in so many words. He hadn't needed to. The hostess had understood and had given her notice the following week, which Victor had interpreted as a staffing problem rather than a moral message. Raymond had come in without a reservation. It was a Tuesday. The restaurant was half empty. He had been seated eventually at a table near the back. He had ordered navy bean soup and bread. The soup that arrived was cold. He mentioned it to the teenager taking orders. Not angrily, just mentioned it. The teenager apologized and went to the kitchen. Victor Greer came out of the kitchen, and then he did what he did. Let's talk about the medal, because the medal matters. Raymond Cole had, in the inside chest pocket of his jacket, the jacket he had set on the back of his chair, the jacket he always wore over the flannel on evenings that dropped below 50 degrees, a small velvet case. Inside the case was a silver star. He had carried it since 2007 when it had been awarded, not because he was vain about it, but because carrying it made him feel connected to the people he had been with when it was earned. two men named Thomas and Julian who had not come home, who lived in him in the particular way that people live in you when their absence is something you hold responsible. The Silver Star was awarded for action under fire. The citation described it in the formal language of military commendations, language that was, by design, both precise and insufficient. It said that Sergeant Major Cole had exposed himself to hostile fire to extract two wounded personnel under conditions that the awarding authority described as extreme. It did not say that he had done it 3 times, the third time dragging a man twice his weight while being shot at from 2 directions before the medevac could reach them. It did not say what he had said to Thomas in the last minutes or what Thomas had said back. Documents don't carry that kind of weight. He carried the medal because of Thomas and Julian. He didn't show it to people at restaurants. Victor Greer had no idea it was 2 feet from his elbow when he walked away. But here is what happened instead of what Victor expected to happen. At the table near the window, the couple, a man and woman in their 40s, who had been having a quiet anniversary dinner and who had frozen at what they'd witnessed, did not leave immediately. The woman, whose name was Patricia, looked at her husband. Her husband looked at her. She picked up her phone. She didn't call anyone. She typed. She posted a single paragraph to a Facebook group for military families in the city. The paragraph was brief and factual. The name of the restaurant, the address, what she had seen, and the word veteran. She didn't know Raymond was a veteran. She suspected from his bearing, the stillness, the hands, the particular way he absorbed something that would have moved most people. She was right, though she wouldn't find out until the following morning. The post was in a group with 1,200 members. It was shared publicly. Patricia had made it public on purpose. Within 2 minutes. By 9:30 that evening, it had been shared into 4 other groups. By 10:15, it was outside the groups entirely, traveling the way social posts travel when they contain a specific injustice, a specific location, and a word, veteran, that carries particular moral weight in a particular kind of community. At 11 o'clock, the first people arrived outside the harvest table. They were not angry. They were standing. By 11:45, there were 30 people standing outside on Clement Street, quiet, some of them in military jackets, some with phones recording, some just standing in the November cold because they had decided when they read the post that they would rather be there than not be there. By midnight, the people sitting at the tables inside had seen the crowd outside. By 12:30, the tables had emptied, not because anyone made a scene, not because anyone shouted, because something had happened in this restaurant that made being a customer of this restaurant feel like a statement about what you were willing to be in proximity to. Table by table, people paid and left. By 1 o'clock, the restaurant had 6 customers. By 2 o'clock, it had 2. By 5 in the morning, when the first light came through those windows, there was no one left. Victor Greer had watched this happen. He had not, at first, understood what he was watching. He had gone to the window once and seen the crowd outside and called his manager and told him to call the police and report a disturbance. The police arrived, assessed the situation, concluded that people standing quietly on a public sidewalk did not constitute a disturbance, and left. Victor had watched the patrol car drive away with an expression that was beginning to show the shape of what he had done. Raymond Cole, for his part, had eaten his bread, not the soup, and tipped the teenage waitress who had not done anything wrong and had left before any of this began. He had driven home. He had not posted anything, had told no one, had simply gone home with the experience in his chest, the way certain things sit, heavy and familiar, when you have been carrying weight for a very long time. He found out the following morning when his daughter Simone called him. She had seen the post. She read it to him. He listened without speaking, the way he listened to most things. He said, "It was the soup, not the service. The girl who took my order didn't do anything wrong." Simone said, "Dad, it's bigger than that now." It was bigger than that now. By morning, the story had reached a veterans advocacy organization that had been operating in the city for 12 years. Their communications director, a former Marine named Patricia Okafor, made a call to the local news affiliate. She gave them the name of the restaurant, the name of the owner, and Patricia's post, which she had printed out. She said, "We would like the public to have this information." The story ran at noon. By 3 o'clock, 3 additional witnesses had come forward. People who had been in the restaurant, people who had wanted to say something at the time and hadn't, people who were saying it now. Their accounts were consistent. Their accounts described, in addition to the main event, a pattern, comments that had been made before to other customers in a register that the witnesses now understood they should have responded to differently. Victor Greer issued a statement through the restaurant's social media that evening. It said that the incident was being taken out of context and that the restaurant valued all customers. The statement was, by any measure, inadequate. Not merely morally but strategically, in that it confirmed without intending to that Victor was aware of an incident worth contextualizing. The health department received 2 complaints the following day, one from a patron, one filed by the Veterans Advocacy Organization citing the act of deliberately contaminating a served food item. The health department investigation opened within 48 hours. The harvest table remained open during the investigation, but it did not recover its customer base in any meaningful way. The people who had been regulars, the Tuesday couples, the Friday bar crowd, the Sunday brunch tables, had largely made a decision, quietly, individually, without coordination, that their presence in that building was a statement about what they were willing to participate in. Most of them had made the decision and moved on. A few went elsewhere and told people why. Word moved the way it moves in a neighborhood. Victor Greer closed the harvest table 16 weeks after the night of the soup. The announcement was brief. He cited economic conditions. Nobody in the neighborhood was confused about what had happened. Raymond Cole heard about the closure the same way he heard about most things, from Simone, who called him on a Sunday. He listened. He said, "Good." He paused. He said, "That girl who was taking orders, the teenager, I hope she found somewhere decent to work." Simone said she would try to find out. Raymond did one thing publicly, in the aftermath. He agreed to speak at a veterans community event, not about the restaurant, not about Victor Greer, but about what service had meant to him, and what it cost, and what it left you with. He spoke for 20 minutes. He did not mention the harvest table once. He talked about Thomas and Julian. He talked about what it meant to hold something for someone who couldn't hold it anymore. He held up the silver star briefly. Not long, just for a moment, the way you show something that is the physical weight of a larger thing. And then he put it back in its case and put it in his pocket. He said one thing about the kind of world he wanted to live in. He said he didn't need it to be grateful. He had not served for gratitude. He said he needed it to be honest, to see people, to know that the man in the frayed flannel shirt might be carrying something heavier than it looked. The audience was quiet for a moment after he finished. Then they stood. He looked out at them. He folded his hands. He didn't smile. He was not a man who smiled for applause, but he was present, fully present, the way he had learned to be present in the places where presence was the only thing left. He left the stage. He drove home. He put the medal in the drawer beside his bed, next to the photograph of Thomas and Julian from 2007, the one taken 3 weeks before the deployment where everything changed. He made navy bean soup for himself on Sunday. He stood at his stove and made it from scratch, the way his mother had taught him, and he sat at his own kitchen table in his flannel shirt and ate it slowly, in the quiet that is not emptiness but something more like fullness. The specific quiet of a man who has carried his dignity through every room that ever tried to take it and brought it home intact. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever known someone who carried more than people thought to ask about, share this. Give it to someone who needs it today. Like it, subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed something wrong in a public place and wished you had spoken? What stopped you? What would you do differently now? Here's what really gets me. It isn't the crowd on the sidewalk, though that crowd is everything. It isn't the empty tables or the closed restaurant. It is Raymond at 1 o'clock in the morning, at home, having told no one, his silver star in his jacket pocket, making the quiet decision to let the world be what it was and to not let it be his wound. He had done that 31 years of his life. He had learned it the hard way, on deployments that cost more than he will ever say in a public speech. He had learned that dignity is not the same as recognition, that you can carry something of great value and have nobody see it and still know what you're carrying, that the weight doesn't change based on who acknowledges it. But here is what the crowd on the sidewalk understood, standing in the November cold with their phones and their military jackets and their quiet presence. Dignity is contagious. When you witness it, when you see a man sit with his hands folded and move the bowl aside with complete stillness, something happens in you. Something decides which side of a moment you want to be on. What side would you have been on? If you had been in that restaurant, not the couple near the window who did the right thing, but one of the others, one of the ones who looked at their plate, would you have looked up? What would it have taken? Leave me your honest answer. There's no wrong answer, but there is yours, and I think it matters that you know it.